You have to fight tooth and nail just to prove that you are who you are. Hi, I'm Vixie. I am 22 years old. I am intersex, and I was raised Mormon. It's a pretty interesting thing being raised Mormon. For me, so I know in, for example, like Utah, there's several different sects of Mormonism. Mine was just the LDS sect. They actually don't tell you that there are other sects. Like, we never learned that. I didn't learn that there were other, like, sects of Mormonism until I, like, watched some stuff online. Just like they absolutely refuse to acknowledge each other, at least from what I've seen. Probably because they disagree on beliefs a lot, but so I was adopted. My biological parents, I'm in contact with them. They are phenomenal people. The reason I was adopted was because they were pretty young and not financially stable enough to raise a kid. When they were looking at like the applications of like who's going to get the kid, on the application that my adoptive parents sent in, they had marked themselves as ex-Mormon, which was really important to my biological parents because both of my biological parents are also ex-Mormon, and they wanted to make sure that I did not grow up having to face that stuff. Because one of the things about the Mormon church is they basically groom you from a really young age.
Yeah.
Like, in Sunday school, you sing songs about going on a mission. They make you view it like it is the most important thing you'll ever do. And it's such an honor and a privilege to go on a mission. And it's just not. It's predatory at best and dangerous at worst. So, with the Mormon church, the tithing rate is 10%. They basically want their members to pay 10% of everything they make, no matter what that number is. But a lot of the times when you get sent on a mission, you get sent to some impoverished third world country, and it's not fair to, convince people of this and then ask that they, pay 10% of what little they already make.
Yeah.
So it's kind of predatory at best. And when I say dangerous, someone I'm related to went on a mission somewhere in the Pacific. And while he was there, one of the other missionaries got bitten by a snake in his sleep, never woke up.
Oh my God.
Venomous snake crawled in through the window and got him while he was sleeping. And he never woke up. He never came home to his family. And that, of course, that was sort of, oh, it's such a big tragedy. But of course, it was sort of played off as like, well, he died doing the Lord's work and
Ugh.
yada yada. So that's what I mean when I say it's dangerous. It definitely can be. The other thing is the missionaries, like, you're not armed and you can get sent to some pretty dangerous places. Oftentimes, missionaries are targeted by like muggers and stuff and robbers.
Are they ever targeted by the government?
I haven't heard stories of them get targeted by governments. Mostly because, I don't know, it wouldn't look very good for a government to go after missionaries
Yeah.
of pretty much any religion, but it certainly doesn't stop the robbers. They're like, "Oh, easy target. They're not carrying any weapons. They're not gonna put up a fight."
Is it part of like the doctrine or something that you can't have weapons to keep yourself safe?
No, that's not part of the doctrine. It's just you aren't allowed to as a missionary.
Hmm.
So, something a bit different with, Mormon missionaries. You really are expected to spend every waking moment either praying, reading the scriptures, or essentially having doors slammed in your face all day. Like, when you go on these missions, you are relatively lucky if you convert even one family. Keep in mind these missions last 2.5 years.
Wow.
So the rejection rate is pretty high. I can't say I blame the people rejecting, but it's got to get pretty demeaning feeling pretty fast. Just having that many door slams in your face.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like because Mormonism is so America centric, in its nature and its doctrine. Like going to other countries and trying to spread it, you're trying to sell something pretty extreme to them, huh?
Yeah, I mean, essentially you are. You are trying to sell something that, in a lot of people's opinions, goes pretty contrary to what every other Christian religion believes. Because, in Mormonism, you've got the Old Testament and the New Testament, but there's the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, and the Book of Mormon on top of that. I mean, I know the Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price are texts that exist outside of Mormonism, but you rarely hear about them. The whole concept of the Book of Mormon is essentially that after Jesus died, or I guess went up to heaven, he then went down to the Americas and, was like preaching in the Americas. Yeah, the Bible just ends it with he raises from the tomb and goes to heaven and the end.
They kind of just stapled that lore on top of it, huh?
Yeah, they kind of really did. So, already Mormonism is it's kind of a weird thing to get brought up into. A lot of people kind of think of it as a cult. I wouldn't say it's a cult cuz I mean, unlike Jehovah's Witness, if you leave the church, your friends and family are not made to disown you. At least from what I've seen, that was not there.
I mean, it happens. I've met people that did happen to, but it's not required.
Yeah, but that's usually the family's choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually.
Usually.
Sometimes the bishop talks the family into doing that, but
Hmm.
that's usually not something widely preached.
Yeah.
Moving on past that, and this sort of gets more into the being trans and intersex. I was always a pretty weird kid, but the first time that I basically knew I wanted to be a girl was when I was 4 years old. That's pretty early for that kind of thing to be hitting. But at that time, I kind of essentially thought like, "Oh, I can grow up to be whatever. I'll grow up to be a girl. Cool." And I definitely, like, played with a lot of feminine toys growing up. Like, I played dress up with princess dresses and enjoyed having my nails done and stuff. That's not to say I also didn't play with masculine toys, but there's a pretty even mix.
Hmm.
I remember when I was 4 years old, I went up to the dining room where we were having dinner, and I proudly proclaimed, "I'm a girl now. Call me this." And I don't remember what dumbass name 4-year-old me chose, but I mean, that wasn't even, like, I hadn't had any, like, outside influences. I just wanted to be a girl.
Yeah.
My parents shut that down pretty quick. I think especially in part because my grandma was there, my very devoutly religious Mormon grandma. That was the first time that I really had those thoughts, but they definitely continued after that. I remember the first time I was called handsome. I felt entirely repulsed by getting called handsome to the point that I straight up told my parents, "Don't ever call me handsome. I hate that word more than anything. Don't ever call me handsome." And for the most part, they did respect that. That was, again, probably I was 4 or 5 years old.
So it started early. Like it was so built in.
Yeah, it started really, really early for me, which, you know, yeah, that happens, but with a lot of, like, trans stories, a lot of this reflection comes later in life. Usually, you know, about as early as, preteens, but
Like you didn't even need to be cracked.
no, my
It was
egg
just
came
there.
pre-cracked.
Yeah. Part of me wonders, like, because you were assigned male at birth, right?
I
But
was.
yeah, but being intersex doesn't just come with, sometimes it has to do with genitalia. Not all the time, to be clear. But one of the things that comes with it is hormonal differences as well. So part of me wonders if
Yeah,
the natural hormonal differences just were already there before you even got to the point where most people register it.
I do know they were because looking at early adolescent symptoms of hormonal imbalances, I mean, you get things like stomach aches, irritations, like irritability, bone deficiency problems is another. But those were all things that I struggled with a lot.
Yeah.
You said it can be genital, it can be hormonal. For me, it was definitely both.
Mhm.
On the outside, at the time that I was born, my genitals looked fairly normal. That would not stay true.
Mm.
I'm not gonna get too into it because of NSFW stuff, but
Yeah.
as I developed, they began to be more ambiguous, and, like, my testes never descended fully.
Mm.
So, the skin that would otherwise be, like, scrotal tissue kinda ended up being more like labia. That's really weird. Like, there isn't a hole right there, but it's essentially like, the penis and then labia surrounding it, and my testes are still up in my abdomen.
And to be clear, when does testicular development of that type usually happen?
Oh, geez, I don't know. You mean when do they drop?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it happens relatively early.
Yeah.
Usually when they don't drop, you have to get them removed
Mm.
because otherwise they can herniate and cause other problems.
Yeah.
So I'm kinda surprised that that never happened to me.
Well, I'm glad it didn't.
As far as the hormonal issue stuff go, I went through 4 puberties.
Oh.
4. I know, that sounds really weird, because it is. My first puberty was a female puberty. I think I was 10 to 12? This is essentially the point where in school, you have your first batch of sex ed where they say, you're going to grow taller and hairier and more muscular, and your voice is going to drop, and you're going to have some weird stuff happen down there. And then the exact opposite happened to me.
Mm.
I started growing boobs. I, to this day, do not have facial hair. Like, I don't even have armpit hair.
Hmm.
Like, that never happened to me. Yeah, they say, "Oh, you're gonna get stronger and hairier and your voice will drop," and that never happened. I was I had such a high voice, I was placed in the female choir as a soprano. God, going through school like that, I mean, of course, it was really confusing, but the bullying and harassment that I received from that was also pretty awful because, I mean, you grow up your entire life, you kind of had to come to terms with, I don't want to be, but I guess I'm a boy. And everyone around you knows you as a guy. And then all of a sudden, your face gets a little rounder and your voice doesn't drop, and you start having breast growth. Super, super weird and uncomfortable. In part because my school is one of the schools that made you change for gym class.
Oh.
So I always locked myself in a stall in the bathroom because we didn't even have locker rooms. I was like doing my best to like cover it up. One story that bridges off of this, we had this really big kid. He was kind of a bully. I'm not gonna say his name. Just think he was about a 75 to 100 pounds bigger than I was. And this was in like fifth or sixth grade. And it was at this point that I started to wear trainer bras because I had like legitimate breast growth. And if I didn't, then it was pretty noticeable. So there I am changing in the locker room, and this dude picks up another kid and throws him into the stall door, breaks the lock on the stall door. There I am mortified that like one of the meanest, biggest, toughest kids in the grade is looking at me while I'm changing. He sees me, he sees my body, and I'm expecting to like, oh hey, you fucking faggot," or some shit like that. Like I'm expecting to get like beat down and harassed. He doesn't. He takes one look at me, his eyes widen like dinner plates, and he just really quietly under his breath says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then closes the door and walks away. And after that day, he never harassed me again. And I don't even know what to think about that. Because I kept asking my mom, like, "Hey, why am I growing boobs?" She's like, "You're not growing boobs. You're gaining weight or something." And I was like, "No, you can still count the ribs on me. I'm not gaining weight. I'm just growing boobs." So she took me to the pediatrician, and we asked the pediatrician, "Why am I growing boobs?" And the pediatrician takes a look at my chest and says, "Yup, those are boobs. Anyways, have fun in school."
Ugh.
Like, no explanation was offered or given, not to me, not to my mom. And this is another point that I will touch on multiple times here, but more so later, is the sheer amount of medical erasure that happens to intersex people.
Yeah.
After that, my female puberty lasted 2 or 3 years there. Then the tail end of sophomore year in high school, beginning of junior year, that was when I got my first male puberty, and my voice did drop a significant amount. And I was expecting, a lot of other changes like, oh, hair growth and stuff like that. That never came. I did get stronger though, in part because of the extracurricular activities I did. See, I became a blacksmith. Blacksmithing is pretty physically taxing.
Yeah.
You gotta be strong to be a blacksmith, or if you're not, you will be by the time you're experienced with it. So I had my first male puberty, and that lasted all of about a year and a half, 2 years. Fast forward a little later, it was 2018. I graduated high school. At this point, I had a girlfriend. We were intimate and stuff. I remember one day she was like, "Are you growing boobs?" And I was like, "I mean, it happened before, but maybe?" She's like, "I'm pretty sure you are. Your chest is squishy." And I was like, "Okay." Well, fast forward on that about a year. They had developed into C cups at that time. Like, no external hormones or anything like that. They had developed into C cups. I should preface this by saying when I was 12, I found out what being trans was. I came out to my mom in that summer of 2012, and she had some particularly nasty things to say
Mm.
about that. So I never brought that up with her again until I transitioned. At this point, I knew I was trans, but I repressed it. I essentially like glued my egg back together.
Yeah.
At that point that I had C cups, I actually liked them a lot. I had every intention of keeping them. I mean, that was the joke I made, like, "I grew them. 'em, I'm keeping them."
At this time, were people referring to you as male or female? And did you correct them if it was male?
At that time, during my second female puberty, people who knew me were referring to me as male. That being said, there were a number of instances where people did not think I was male because I did not look like a guy.
Mm.
During my second female puberty, my hips got wider, my face got rounder. I started growing my hair out as soon as I graduated high school. I had a very round feminine facial shape. I lost some muscle mass. I didn't really have a lot of muscle mass to begin with, but I definitely lost that. And then the addition of the C cups, and there you have it. I was fairly androgynous without meaning to be. I remember at one time, at the time, girlfriend and I went to a club because they had like an 18 and over night, and we'd never been to a club before. So we decided to try it. As we're at the club, this group of guys starts offering to buy both of us drinks and asking to dance with both of us. And I really had no idea why. It wasn't until later when I saw pictures taken of us did I realize I looked like a butch lesbian.
How'd that make you feel?
Honestly, pretty fucking good. Pretty affirmed.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was really weird at the time, and I was honestly a little, I wouldn't say creeped out. I was just really weirded out, but it made sense after I saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was wearing a flannel shirt and everything, so
Yeah. So you kind of stumbled into passing perfectly.
I wasn't passing at that time yet.
Mm.
I didn't start passing until a bit later. It was at that time that my best friend, her name is Grace. She was the person who cracked my egg again. and she has helped me through so much. She has been there for me, and she's kind of an inspiration to me because she has never given up on her own struggle. Grace, fucking thank you if you're going to see this. But yeah, she cracked my egg. And a couple months later, I came out again to my mom and I got on hormones. Well, I'll get to that in a second. When I came out to my Mormon mom, given what she said the last time, I knew I was going to have to lay some tough love down. And I basically said, I don't really care if you accept or support me, but just know if you ever want to see your grandchildren or have a relationship with me as an adult, you've got to learn to accept me because I'm trans. The minute that she took, the minute break there was like the longest minute of my life. She's going to say, well, that's it, I guess. Have a good life. But she didn't. She said, all right, I accept you. And that was, yeah, woo! But that was like such a burden lifted off of my back. My adoptive dad, on the other hand, it has taken him quite a while to get used to things. I know he still makes jokes at my expense. It doesn't matter if I'm around or not. He still makes pretty mean jokes at my expense on that, which I don't really appreciate, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
After that, I began trying to get on hormones because, at that point I had a lot of acne. I was very clearly having massive hormonal imbalance. At this point, it actually had not occurred to me that I could be intersex. That came a little bit later. I got a blood panel done, which they do before they give you hormones. And I got a call about a week later over the phone. They said, sorry to be the ones to tell you this. We picked up some strange hormone readings. You have a brain tumor. I was already in a really, really rough place with depression and dysphoria. And that was probably the worst news that I could have gotten, was that they weren't going to give me hormones. And the reason they weren't was because they don't know how the brain tumor would have reacted. So no hormones and a brain tumor on top of everything. And that was actually the second time I tried to get hormones, and I got rejected from two different places for two different reasons. I won't really go into the first one. It was just it was my college's health center. They required some like pretty strict stuff to get on hormones from there. So I went to an informed consent clinic. That's where I got the news about the brain tumor.
Can you tell me what an informed consent clinic is for everyone at home?
So, an informed consent clinic is a place you can go. You tell them, I want hormones. And you talk to them, and they say, well, what are you going for? Are you going for looking female or androgynous? For the non binary pals out there. Would you like to look a little bit more feminine? They work with you on what you want to do with hormones, and they give you a big packet, and that explains all of the side effects of hormones. They explain to you, this is permanent. Changes are going to happen to your body, your bone structure, your tissue. These are permanent changes. You'll get wide hips. You can't undo that. No surgery exists to undo that. You will develop breast tissue, which at this point I already had. But, they're like, the only way of fixing that is a cosmetic surgery that will not be covered through your insurance. They make sure you understand it, like what you're doing, pretty well. And then you have to sign it. And then they do a blood panel. They make sure you're all right, and they give you hormones. With that blood panel, they establish a baseline. My baseline was weird. I had a high estrogen and low testosterone.
Were they aware of you being intersex?
Nope. All these things adding up, and even I wasn't aware. But it was around that time that I started to question it, because I met some intersex people, and their experiences sounded a fair bit like mine. Weird puberties, hormonal imbalances, and now I had actual numerical proof of my hormone imbalances. I thought it was all very weird. They essentially said my testosterone was low to the point of a 90-year-old man would have more testosterone.
Jeez.
And my estrogen was high enough that like a woman in her 30s or 40s would have that amount of estrogen. That's what got me started thinking, am I intersex? I called my parents and I explained to them, hey, I just got some news. I have a brain tumor. I don't think my parents took it at all seriously because they laughed.
Ugh.
They laughed and were like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. I got an MRI done. They gave me the disc, the disk drive, and I put that into one of the library computers, looked through the images. Sure enough, there was a nickel-sized tumor pressing on my pituitary gland and my thalamus. The pituitary gland is the part of your brain that deals with hormones and stuff. It also deals with your immune system because, and I'll get to this later, it controls a chemical called cortisol, which is your body's stress hormone. If you don't have cortisol, you essentially don't have an immune system. Your thalamus is the part of your brain that deals with a lot of involuntary stuff like breathing, heartbeat,
Ooh.
temperature regulation.
Might be important.
I think it deals with the micro movements your eyes make. Not like REM. Your eyes move around a little bit in very small amounts whenever you're looking at anything,
So it keeps the engine running, and this thing was being basically
essentially.
pushed on.
Yeah, it was. That's not all. There was another thing too. There was another mass in my brain aside from that. And upon seeing that second one, I really felt like my worst fears had been realized. This is brain cancer, isn't it? There's really not going to be a coming back from this. That fucking destroyed me. Here I was trying to transition and receiving the news of what appeared to be brain cancer, realizing I was never going to be able to live as a girl. In a follow up MRI, that other mass disappeared. The doctors don't think it was a tumor. They think it was some weird blood vessel structure in my brain that went away, which I know is weird. But the initial tumor was, yeah, a tumor. So at this point in time, I was being denied hormones because of the tumor. The endocrinologist I went to go see gave me two options. The first of which was a series of dopaminergic medicine. Dopaminergic meaning it would basically latch onto dopamine receptors. It would have made me more depressed,
Mm.
but it would have shrunk the tumor. It would not have gotten rid of it, only shrank it. So that was the first option. The second option was, given the tumor's position, a fairly risky brain surgery. Given that I was already extremely dysphoric and depressed and super suicidal, I opted for the brain surgery. The odds of surviving weren't great. There was a good chance that it was going to leave lasting damage to like the functionality of my body. My brain was putting pressure on the ocular nerves, so my field of vision was slowly getting cut off from like here down to here down to
Oh.
here. And at one point, like, I was walking into shopping carts and railings and stuff like that because past about here below me, I could not see.
Mm.
But I had the brain surgery and it knocked out my immune system back to the cortisol. My body was incapable of making cortisol, and there was high risk of something called diabetes insipidus, which is where your body cannot hold on to water.
Oh. So you'd basically die of thirst even if you were drinking.
Yeah,
Wow.
because you'd intake water and like immediately piss it out.
Mm.
When I came out of the surgery, I woke up in the intensive care unit. It was the brain bleeds ICU. It's essentially the ICU that you don't come back from.
My God.
Everybody in there was either comatose, dead, or dying. My neighbor, the person in the room neighboring mine, died while I was there. And I watched the priest go in and the doctors go in, nurses called code, family went in, and it wasn't that night. It was several nights after I got in there. I walked with a nurse to the Panera in the hospital, and the nurse said it was the first time in 23 years that a patient from that ward had walked with her.
Oh my God.
They didn't tell me how bad, the odds were of everything and, how risky this was, but it was pretty clear. They didn't have to tell me. When I awoke from the surgery, my adoptive dad was sitting at the end of the bed, and one of the first things he said to me was, "Are you still trans?" As if the tumor had caused it. Just a royally fucked thing to say to your kid after they wake up from a risky brain surgery.
Yeah.
But I got better. I was moved out of the ICU into the MCU, the moderate care unit, where I saw my endocrinologist again. And I asked her, so one of the ways of figuring out if you're intersex or not is through karyotyping. And that's essentially when, they take your blood and they sequence your chromosomes. Like they actually sort your chromosomes and count them and identify them. So if you have a chromosomal anomaly, that will show it. Like if you have, I don't know, an example would be Turner syndrome, that would show it. Or Klinefelter's. Klinefelter's is when you have two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome. That's Klinefelter's. It would show if you have a chromosomal anomaly. And my endocrinologist looked me up and down, dead in the eyes, and said, "You don't look intersex." It's like, "Are you kidding me?" She was like, "Nope, that's something we'd reserve if you needed it, but it doesn't look like you do."
Ugh.
I was like, "That's not up to you to decide." Fast forward a couple weeks. I had gotten my immune system back. Up until that point, I was having cluster headaches, which are extremely painful, and I was having to rely on external cortisol. But I went into her office and she gave me like an up and down full physical, make sure everything was okay. This was like a full physical. And she saw down there and she was like, I think you should get karyotyped. And I was like, "You dumb motherfucker. I asked you for that." She was like, "Yeah, but I didn't see that. So, but yeah, you should get karyotyped." I went out and I went back to the informed consent clinic. And because I didn't have the tumor anymore, they put me on hormones.
Was there any chance, from what the doctors have told you, that the intersex condition's hormonal imbalances could have caused the tumor or made it more likely?
Most doctors essentially kind of refuse to acknowledge that you're intersex, even if you clearly, visibly are.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that hormonal imbalances like that can cause are tumors, brain tumors.
Wow.
So I do think that that is where it came from.
Ugh.
100%. Up until that point, I was DIYing on hormones. So I would buy hormones and get them shipped in past customs from another country where that country's laws about purchasing hormones were more lax. And that was essentially how I was keeping the dysphoria at bay, and it was working really well. I was looking really good. About a month after I started DIYing, I started passing. So really, really quickly, I started seeing results.
A month of hormones making that much. That's incredible. I've never heard of something like that. That's awesome.
My boobs grew 3 cup sizes in that first month.
Wow.
I went from C to D, double D, and then triple D.
Yeah, most people wouldn't even notice a difference in the time it took for you to basically switch.
Oh, it hurt like hell.
I bet.
It hurt like hell. When your
Uh,
boobs grow that fast, it hurts so much.
yeah.
It feels like you're getting stabbed in the tit. So I went to the informed consent clinic, and my provider there, fuck, she was really amazing. I got her to give me a referral for a pelvic ultrasound because it was about at that time I started getting periods, like actual blood periods.
Mm.
So we knew there was something down there. So I get this order and I go to the hospital. The ultrasound is going great. The technician is like, "That's your bladder and that's your prostate and that's your uterus." What? what? And then she's, like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. You have a uterus.
Are these people not educated in school about intersex conditions? Like, is this not a necessity to learn about?
She's not a doctor. She was just a technician.
Ah, okay.
As far as doctors go, yeah, there's not a whole lot of education on intersex unless you're like an endocrinologist.
Wow.
If you're not an endocrinologist, usually you aren't going to touch much on intersex stuff. And this is the story that it starts. But the medical erasure is real. The reason doctors won't tell you if you're intersex is, like really, really terrible old school thinking. They consider an intersex diagnosis to be what they call a cognitohazard. Basically, they fear that the patient, upon finding out that they're different and this heavily impacts their life and like your ability to have children and your general overall health and well-being and stuff like that, they think there's a possibility you could go out and try to hurt or kill yourself because of it. So they just won't tell you, which is super fucked up because doctors deliver devastating news all the time. Like when you have cancer, your doctor doesn't fucking hide from you that you have cancer. Your doctor says, this isn't easy to say. You have cancer. Here's your treatment options.
Yeah.
They don't do that with intersex. They straight up don't tell you anything. You have to fight tooth and nail just to prove that you are who you are. So this technician took pictures of ovaries, testes, prostate, a uterus. That got sent to the urologist. In the final report, with the pictures attached, the urologist stated, no abnormalities found. Just a complete and blatant lie. My provider took one look at the pictures and was like, yeah, you're pretty clearly intersex. It's important to note my provider was a nurse practitioner. So they can write prescriptions, but they're not doctors. But she was like, yeah, you are clearly intersex. That's what's going on. It's not within my scope to treat you. But since this is an informed consent clinic, if you want it, I will still treat you. And I said, of course, of course. And I'll do my own research. And I did. She was fantastic. We got to the point that I could go in for a checkup with her and be like, hey, let's do the labs and stuff. Can we include a test for estrone, otherwise referred to as E2? Can we also include a progesterone test? I could essentially like get her to order the tests that I wanted, have the results sent to me as well as her, and then call her up on a video appointment. And basically, through the sheer amount of research that I had to do, would say, I think we need to lower this, or I think we need to increase this, or I think we need to change medications to this. And she would do it. And it was fantastic. She was probably the best provider I had. That was the first time that I had been lied to about being intersex by a doctor, but that was not the last. I eventually did get karyotyped. Something about the karyotyping test is extremely expensive, and oftentimes it is not covered by insurance. It was a pain to even get a karyotype ordered, but I did get one ordered, and I had to pay $1,100 out of pocket.
Oh my God. Did you have insurance?
Yes, but insurance wasn't going to cover it because they didn't see it as medically necessary.
What the fuck?
So I paid that. They collected 12 cells. They were only supposed to grow 5. They would karyotype them, send the results back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Well, I kept calling and calling. 6 weeks later, they sent the results back. On the results, it showed that they'd done the test a total of 4 times, like 4 different growth batches. They had gone through all 12 cells. On the final report, marked it as no abnormalities found.
Oh my God.
Again, normal XY chromosomes is what they marked it as. And my provider took one look at that and was like, they're doing something wrong. This isn't right.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to repeat a test 4 times to get it right. You don't have to keep the results 3 times as needed. Clearly, they found some weird abnormalities and they kept doing the tests to see if they could get a more accurate or less anomalous answer, and they couldn't. So they marked it down as normal because they'd kept it for too long anyways.
The French healer, who is a med student that I know, gave this comment. He said, "Personal experience, we are the first generation to have communication class in med school, and we learned that we need to tell the truth to the patient unless they explicitly don't want to know it." So it does sound like things are getting better.
I'm really, really glad to hear that. And yeah, it is true that most of the doctors that I have had poor experiences with were older doctors who'd been in practice for, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. The thing is, they probably do their job just fine when they don't need to talk about something like this, but then the moment they're needed for something so important, they fail miserably.
So, my endocrinologist who dealt with my brain surgery, once she found out that I was intersex, I mean, she saw it with her own eyes. She immediately went out without talking to me about this at all. She went out and secured a $10,000 research grant from the hospital. She then called my informed consent clinic. She called my provider and tried to convince them to stop providing me hormones so that she could take over and essentially do clinical studies on me.
Without consent.
She didn't talk to me about that at all.
Oh my
Good thing
God.
it's, good thing that's not how healthcare works. And the informed consent clinic essentially told her to fuck off.
Yeah.
And I told her to fuck off too. Because they told her that they would need my permission to do that, to transfer care. So they essentially told her to fuck off. So in the next appointment, she came to me and was like, "This is what I want to do." And I was like, "You want to do what? You want to decrease the level of hormones I'm taking that are working flawlessly on me? Hell no." I walked out of the office and I canceled all of my upcoming appointments. All of them.
Good.
Any follow-up MRIs, anything that would go to her as a report, anything she had ordered, all of it canceled, gone, because she didn't even talk to me about it until she was begging me to sign over my care to her so I could become her fucking lab rat. I do now know what variant of intersex I am. The reason I know is because I did an exorbitant amount of research. I went out, I bought a very expensive high powered microscope. I got my hands on some gamma stain. I got my hands on some other chemicals for staining cells, and I took a look at my own cells.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
I had to do that myself because I couldn't get answers from a urologist. I couldn't get answers from an endocrinologist. Blood tests, I couldn't get answers from anybody. Once I confronted my PCP, my primary doctor, it was a struggle to even get it listed in my chart that I was intersex. And you know what they listed in my chart? They listed unspecified intersex condition.
And at this point, you had presented them with like hard evidence.
I bought a snaking camera to do a colonoscopy essentially and find out where the monthly bleeding was coming from. And I did. I found it. I found a vaginal opening. I, of course, had the results from the stuff I did with the microscope. I had the images from the pelvic ultrasound. I had an MRI more recently taken of down there that shows everything. Even with all of that, actually getting them to try and figure out what variant of intersex it is, fucking impossible. So in my area, there is a center for intersex disorders. It's a part of the local kids hospital. Yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. Performing unnecessary surgeries on children to quote unquote fix them.
Oh my God, I've heard of this.
I was super lucky that that never happened to me.
Yeah.
That I never went through any of those surgeries. I am super lucky because I know so many people who can't say the same. And doctors made a choice and they made the wrong choice. And now they have lost a part of themselves that would otherwise help them to be more content with who they are. But I now know that I am chimeric. I am XX/XY chimeric. It's really weird to think about like two different sets of DNA.
You have a full second set.
Basically, yeah.
Do they like coexist? Are they both in the cells at the same time?
They're not in the same cells at the same time. As far as coexisting, that's hard to call it coexisting. One of the things that happens when you are a chimera is your body is constantly at war with itself. You develop a lot of autoimmune disorders. For example, right now, it is very hard for me to walk because not only have I developed arthritis at 22 years old, I have also developed hip dysplasia. My SI joints are filling with fluid. I have some pretty bad autoimmune gastrointestinal problems. Sometimes my heart does some fucky things. Just all around a mess. And it's specifically because my body is at war with itself. I always make the joke about being a chimera. Edward, Edward, big brother. Anyways, yeah. So the way I've kind of worked around all this medical erasure is I have been going to different specialists for different issues. For the arthritis and for the SI joints, going to a rheumatologist. For the gastrointestinal stuff, the gut doctor. For the heart stuff, going to a cardiologist. I'm having to like split it up.
You have to like put all the puzzle pieces together with specialists that can't deny everything.
Well, yeah, because whether or not they deny that I'm intersex, they can't deny that I am having these autoimmune issues.
Right.
That's what I'm doing, is just getting specific, like, different referrals for all these different things. And that's how I've been going about it.
And the person at the Informed Care Clinic, is she still like the superstar in this? Is she helping you get these referrals?
I'm at a new care clinic now because I moved across the country. But yes, the new clinic that I'm at, she's great. She's helping me get all this done. I actually have not told her that I'm intersex. When I moved across the country, I went to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologist was a total piece of shit. Like, absolutely, completely unprofessional. Refused to continue with the same dosage of hormones that I've been on, like, for 3 years now. I said, "Look, I didn't come for a re-evaluation, I came for continuation of care." She did not seem to understand it at all, so I then went to Planned Parenthood, and at Planned Parenthood, I did tell them, "I'm intersex. I do have a uterus." They said that they would not prescribe me hormones unless I took progesterone along with the hormones. For a normal trans girl, that's a pretty sweet deal right there. You're getting progesterone and hormones. For me, it's not because my body already makes its own progesterone. And when I have external progesterone, it makes me extremely depressed.
Can you explain what that chemical does in a typical human body?
Yeah, progesterone is the pregnancy hormone. It stops your period
Mm.
and allows for fetal development, as far as I understand. In a non-intersex trans woman, it helps to a degree with redistribution of fat. With me, it just fucks with my body so, so much because I have been pregnant before. Like, I know I am capable of getting pregnant. The last time I had tried taking external progesterone, I was so depressed that within 4 days I became suicidal. It was that bad.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, "Well, I'm not gonna do that, not gonna go there." I just haven't told my current provider that I'm intersex, but she is a great help in helping me with all these autoimmune problems. Currently, because of hip dysplasia and my SI joints filling with fluid, I am having to rely on using either a cane or a wheelchair to get around, which has not been super fun and has kind of put me out of work for a while, but progress is coming. I have pain medication now and going to see a rheumatologist in the next couple months, and we are discussing surgical options as well. So that's good. So I think all's going pretty well on that front. Now back to the Mormonism thing. It has been hella interesting how this all has went around with, the Mormon side of my family, the church in general. My adoptive mom and her side of the family are really Mormon. When my uncle came to see me in like a surprise visit while I was recovering from brain surgery, before he saw me, my mom was like, "Hey, we should meet in the cafeteria. I've got some things to explain," which was, essentially, yeah, that I had transitioned and they were down there for like a good 3 hours. And when he came up to see me, He said, "How's my niece doing?" Which was fucking great.
Yeah.
I really didn't expect that coming from that side of my family. My uncle came out as gay in the 80s. They nearly disowned him. So I was nervous, but surprised in a very happy way that apparently with me, they don't give a shit. And that's been the same for the rest of my Mormon family as well. You know who hasn't taken it well? My dad's side. My dad is Lutheran. They haven't been so supportive. They haven't taken it very well. As far as my biological family goes, so I tracked down my biological family. This was hard to do because the adoption agency that I went through and the communication went through from my adoptive parents to them, that was through the adoption agency. The adoption agency went out of business when I was 12.
Oh.
I couldn't just call up the agency and be like, hey, I want to get in touch. So I got a hold of some of the paperwork and I got their names. And I did one of those background check things on everybody in the United States with those names. And I looked at the location history to see who was living in what city during what years in order to give birth to me. And that's how I found them.
Wow.
And it was weird too, because my biological father, I essentially sent him an email like, "Hey, pretty sure you're the person I'm looking for? Did you have a kid with so and so many years ago? Because that's me." And he replied fairly quickly with, "I don't know how you got this email, and I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull here. I don't even know how you know I had a kid that was put up for adoption." And I was like, this isn't a scam. This is me. I'm the kid." And he's like, "No fucking way. It's really you." So yeah, that was hilarious. My biological family is extremely supportive. I have a non-binary sibling as well that I didn't know about until I got into contact with them.
Probably would have been helpful. Glad you got to him eventually, though.
Yeah, my biological dad's parents, so my grandparents are Mormon. They do live in Utah, where, the presence of Mormonism is pretty big out there. Oddly enough, they don't care that I'm trans or intersex either, which I know this is ridiculous because I've heard some very contrary things from other people. Like, oh, they came out of trans as trans and their Mormon families completely disowned them or something. But that didn't happen to me. Almost did happen to me on the Methodist Lutheran side of my family. I don't support the church. I don't really believe in what they stand for and like what the organization does. And there's some really, really fucked up parts about the Mormon church.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's some really, really fucked up parts about it too. I'm just happy that I still have family that cares about me. Things have gotten a lot better in the last couple years with moving out of my parents and getting jobs that are actually fulfilling to me and feeling more confident about my body. For all of you out there who are watching and are struggling with dysphoria, it does get better. It takes time and it takes patience, but holy fuck, does it get better. So don't give up. If there are any intersex people watching this now, there's a really great Discord server called Intersex Haven 2.0. There's a lot of support and a lot of information that goes on, and that has helped me understand my body so much. That Discord has the most knowledgeable people I think I've ever met. So if you are intersex or are suspecting that you're intersex, you want information, you have questions, go ahead and check that out.
Any tips on coming out to your parents as trans or your family as trans?
I mean, there definitely is some testing the waters and some considerations that you want to make before. Like, for me, I didn't come out to my family as an adult until I was moved out and in college and doing stuff on my own.
Yeah.
So that way, if my parents rejected me, I was never going to have to talk to them again, and they couldn't kick me out either because I was already out of there off at college.
That's a piece of advice I've heard very often about coming out to your family is if you think that you're in danger, if you tell them, wait till you're in a safe place. But the moment you're
Yeah,
ready, like, let them know and don't back off.
it's okay to start hormones and not tell them.
Yeah.
If you don't think they can handle it, they don't need to know until you're ready to tell them. Tips on it, though, would be, sitting them down and really just try and have a calm, rational discussion about it. If they don't accept you, what's going to happen? Probably not going to have a relationship with you. If you have kids, they're going to be missing out on grandchildren, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
The other question was just a general advice for trans people, like maybe some tips about existing in that way.
Yes, I do. I have tons of advice. Because I am intersex, I had to learn everything that there is to know about hormones and like the medicines you take to transition. Because, just like with the progesterone, there was a good chance that my body was going to do some funky stuff when I started taking them.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest thing that I hear is people who have been on hormones for 3, 4, 5 years and really haven't gotten a ton of changes. When I ask them, well, what dose of hormones are you on? And it's usually the same thing, like 2 milligrams of estrogen a day or less than that. And on spironolactone, like a low dose, like 50 milligrams of spironolactone. If you're not seeing changes, there's a good chance you're not being given a high enough dose. WPATH is what doctors follow. That's the guidelines set by insurance companies. WPATH recommends lower doses. Here's the other thing. WPATH is old, antiquated research from the 1980s.
Mm.
Get yourself on a higher dosage. Get on a higher dosage of blockers and get on a higher dosage of estrogen. If you can, get off of spironolactone altogether. Take cyproterone acetate or bicalutamide. Bicalutamide good. You can get it in the US. Another thing is DIYing. I don't recommend DIYing, especially if you don't know what you're doing. But if you're that desperate, it is a thing that exists. You can find resources on it. It is an option. I think I go for all of us when I say, as dangerous as it can be, DIYing and doing it yourself is still better than crippling dysphoria causing you to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Just be safe and don't stop fighting. Conservatives say, like, oh, the majority of people who transition when they're young detransition later in life.
That's just not true.
That's not actually true. The actual statistic of people who detransition is less than 1%. It is that small a number. Something about the trans kids should have access to safe hormones. You know what the suicide rate is for trans people who don't have access to hormones?
It's significantly higher than those who do, right?
It's like 40 something percent.
Oh my god.
There hasn't been a group in human history with a suicide rate that high since the Holocaust happened.
Oh my god.
Oh, and yes, there are in fact studies that show that drops down significantly once people actually get on hormones and get the gender affirming care they need. I have lost a number of friends to suicide,
Yeah.
a number of trans friends and intersex friends. In the last 3 months, I have had to say goodbye to 6 friends,
Oh my god.
close friends that I've known for years, friends that I've played games with, hung out with, helped through their hard times, and at the end, wasn't even able to say goodbye. It's got to stop somewhere.
You don't fix this any way other than giving them what they need. There is no other way to make this better. You give people gender affirming care that they need to survive. It's that simple.
I didn't mention this either. The first time I tried to kill myself, I was 8 years old. And from the period of when I was 8 up until about when I started high school, I tried to kill myself several more times. And I know that was in part because of dysphoria, feeling like I'd never get there. I did, and I'm sitting here today to show it.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring.